Madame la Présidente, permettez-moi de vous féliciter pour la présidence de la Confédération suisse et d'exprimer la satisfaction de ma délégation à voir votre pays guider nos délibérations ce mois d'octobre 2024. Je salue aussi les efforts constants de son Excellence M. Antonio Guterres, secrétaire général des Nations Unies pour la paix en République démocratique du Congo. Mes remerciements vont également à l'ambassadeur Wang Xia, envoyé spécial du secrétaire général pour la région des Grands Lacs, ainsi qu'à ma compatriote, Madame Sarah Kiamutambwe, pour son témoignage qui nous interpelle. Madame la Présidente, distingués membres du Conseil, ma présence ici aujourd'hui est un rappel de l'obligation sacrée de ce Conseil, celle de préserver la paix et la sécurité internationale. La République démocratique du Congo, comme tout État membre de cette organisation, doit bénéficier de la même considération. Or, la crise qui persiste à l'est de mon pays, orchestrée et alimentée par des forces extérieures, met en péril cette paix, non seulement pour nous Congolaises et Congolais, mais pour l'ensemble de la région et par ricochet pour la stabilité mondiale. Le rapport du secrétaire général sur la mise en œuvre de l'accord-cadre pour la paix, la sécurité et la coopération pour la République démocratique du Congo et la région des Grands Lacs est sans appel. Il met en lumière une situation sécuritaire qui se détériore, des tensions croissantes entre la RDC et le Rwanda et une crise humanitaire tragique. Ce rapport appelle à une mobilisation urgente et un sursaut diplomatique pour restaurer la paix et répondre aux souffrances des populations. Après 12 années, force est de constater que les réunions et les rapports n'ont pas produit de progrès concrets. Madame la Présidente, cette crise n'est pas un simple accident de l'histoire. Depuis près de 3 décennies, le peuple congolais endure des souffrances indicibles et les mécanismes mis en place pour restaurer la paix, tels que l'accord-cadre d'Addis-Abeba, échouent face à la mauvaise foi de certains. Bien que cet accord ait été déséquilibré dès le départ, la République démocratique du Congo l'a signé dans l'espoir de ramener la paix à son peuple. Nous avons respecté nos engagements avec sérieux, mais nous attendons toujours que d'autres signataires, notamment ceux qui les enfreignent sans conséquence, soient enfin tenus responsables par ce Conseil avec la fermeté et la clarté nécessaires. Nous saluons l'adoption le 21 juin 2024 du projet de plan d'action pour la revitalisation de l'accord-cadre, tel que mentionné dans le paragraphe 14 du rapport sous examen. Ce document sera examiné lors du 12e sommet de haut niveau du mécanisme régional de suivi par les chefs d'État avant sa validation, comme précisé dans le rapport S-2024-700. Une fois encore, notre attente porte sur des actions réelles et non sur des promesses restées vaines. Madame la Présidente, la situation sur le terrain est alarmante et les chiffres du désastre humanitaire dans l'est de mon pays sont accablants. Près de 7 millions de Congolais sont actuellement déplacés, vivant dans des conditions de dénuement total, faisant de la RDC le pays avec la plus grande population de déplacés internes au monde. Le rapport de votre groupe d'experts confirme la présence de plus de 4 000 soldats des forces de défense rwandaises sur le sol congolais, dépassant les effectifs du M23. Ainsi, le Rwanda, contributeur de troupes aux Nations Unies, s'ingère impunément dans les affaires de ses voisins en violation flagrante du droit international. Cette ingérence s'accompagne d'une série de manœuvres illégitimes visant à restructurer l'administration locale dans les zones occupées, notamment à travers des nominations d'autorités coutumières imposées par le M23 et soutenues par le Rwanda. Ces groupes cherchent à modifier les équilibres démographiques et culturels, notamment dans le territoire de Rutshuru. Ces actes sapent l'autorité de l'État congolais et instaurent une administration parallèle divisant les communautés. Par ailleurs, des transferts de population sont signalés sous couvert de mouvements de réfugiés, que nous rejetons fermement. Le retour des déplacés et des réfugiés doit et sera uniquement encadré par l'État congolais avec l'appui du Haut-Commissariat des Nations Unies pour les réfugiés pour garantir des retours volontaires et dignes. Madame la Présidente, distingués membres du Conseil, le processus de Rwanda, quant à lui, initié en 2022 pour répondre à cette crise, expose les limites de l'accord-cadre à garantir la pleine responsabilité des signataires. Nous avons délibérément évité de divulguer dans l'espace public et les médias les détails du processus de Rwanda, par respect pour le médiateur et les vies humaines en jeu afin de garantir la sérénité des négociations. Cependant, il est désormais évident que face à l'urgence de la situation, il est de notre devoir de clarifier devant ce Conseil les véritables obstacles qui freinent ce processus et l'adoption du projet d'accord proposé par la médiation angolaise. Premièrement, le plan harmonisé pour la neutralisation des FDLR et le désengagement des forces. Ce plan repose sur deux volets, l'un pour la neutralisation des FDLR et l'autre pour le retrait des forces rwandaises. Dès avril 2024, la République démocratique du Congo a élaboré son plan de neutralisation des FDLR, avec précision et incluant une évaluation complète de la menace, des opérations militaires et un suivi rigoureux des résultats. En revanche, la contribution du Rwanda sur le retrait des forces se résume à une simple promesse de retrait sans garantie ni détails concrets, créant un déséquilibre qui compromet l'application cohérente du plan. Pire encore, le Rwanda conditionne son retrait à la neutralisation des FDLR, un chantage qui viole les principes fondamentaux du droit international. Pour que ce processus ait du sens, il est impératif que les deux volets soient mis en œuvre de manière concomitante. Seule une simultanéité peut assurer la crédibilité et l'efficacité d'un plan qui aspire à restaurer la paix dans la région. Deuxièmement, le Rwanda rejette toute clause de responsabilité dans un éventuel accord de paix, ce qui soulève de graves interrogations sur la sincérité de son engagement envers la paix. En République démocratique du Congo, nous acceptons pleinement d'être tenus responsables de nos actes, car le principe de responsabilité est le socle de toute résolution de conflit. Il impose à chaque partie de respecter scrupuleusement ses engagements avec rigueur et sincérité. Lorsqu'un accord est violé, le principe commande des conséquences claires et sans équivoque, qu'il s'agisse de sanctions ou de poursuites judiciaires, pour que justice et droit international ne soient pas de simples mots, mais des réalités. Sans responsabilité, il ne peut y avoir ni confiance, ni paix durable. Enfin, troisièmement, la République démocratique du Congo réaffirme la nécessité impérative d'un mécanisme de justice régionale pour répondre aux violations flagrantes du droit international commises depuis la résurgence du M23 en 2022. Le Rwanda refuse catégoriquement l'inclusion de toute disposition visant à intégrer ce mécanisme dans l'accord de paix actuellement en discussion. Ce refus obstiné dévoile sans ambiguïté l'intention du Rwanda d'échapper à la lumière de la justice. Madame la Présidente, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du Conseil, en ce qui concerne l'exploitation illégale des ressources naturelles de mon pays, mon gouvernement demande instamment l'imposition de sanctions sévères contre tous les acteurs de cette chaîne de pillage, du producteur à l'exportateur. Nous appelons également à la mise en place d'un mécanisme similaire au processus de Kimberley pour gérer l'or provenant des zones de conflit afin de mettre un terme à cette économie parallèle qui alimente la violence. Mon gouvernement, qui souscrit aux recommandations de l'atelier de Khartoum du 2 septembre 2021 sur les ressources naturelles dans la région des Grands Lacs, est prêt à participer activement aux discussions pour la mise en place d'un tel processus afin d'éradiquer ce fléau. Enfin, je tiens à saluer l'initiative de la réunion du 1er octobre 2024 aux Nations Unies visant à accélérer l'opérationnalisation du programme de désarmement, démobilisation, relèvement communautaire et stabilisation, PDDRCS en sigle, pour la réinsertion des éléments des groupes armés. Nous réitérons notre appel à un soutien substantiel pour ce programme, face aux défis posés par les groupes armés étrangers. Il est essentiel que chaque pays de la région prenne ses responsabilités, comme le fait la République démocratique du Congo, en mettant en place des mécanismes nationaux pour gérer les groupes armés sur leur propre territoire, afin qu'ils retournent dans leur pays d'origine et libèrent ainsi la République démocratique du Congo, et en particulier sa population civile, d'un fardeau porté trop longtemps. Nous demandons également que ce Conseil charge l'envoyé spécial du secrétaire général pour la région des Grands Lacs de fournir un rapport circonstancié sur cette question précise. Madame la Présidente, distingués membres du Conseil, la République démocratique du Congo est une nation éprise de paix. Nous avons fait le choix du dialogue, le choix du multilatéralisme et le choix du respect du droit international. Mais nous ne pouvons accepter que notre souveraineté et notre intégrité territoriale soient sacrifiées sur l'autel de l'inaction et de l'impunité. Nous appelons ce Conseil à prendre de mesures fermes en imposant des sanctions ciblées contre les individus rwandais au sommet de la chaîne de commandement impliqués dans le soutien au M23. Les rapports que nous avons tous sous les yeux mettent en lumière leur rôle direct dans les attaques contre le territoire congolais, y compris sur des camps de déplacés internes et leur coordination avec des groupes armés. Nous demandons donc que ces sanctions incluent des interdictions de voyage, des gels d'avoirs et des mesures économiques, afin de mettre un terme à cette ingérence déstabilisatrice qui menace la paix et la sécurité régionale. Le Conseil de sécurité doit réaffirmer avec force les principes fondamentaux qui constituent le socle de notre patrimoine du multilatéralisme: la justice, la redevabilité et la paix. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie la représentante de la RDC et je passe maintenant la parole au représentant du Rwanda.
Madam President, thank you for giving me the floor. And let me start by congratulating you on your presidency and able stewardship of the Council. I thank the Special Envoy, Ambassador Xia Huang, for his comprehensive briefing, and also recognize Madam Sarah Chabutambwe. Thank you for your work and also for your comprehensive briefing this morning. I also recognize the presence of Honorable Minister Teresa Kaikwamba Wagner, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the DRC, and the representative of Angola. I thank also member states and council members who spoke before me. Madam President, I'd like to begin by reaffirming Rwanda's commitment to the peace, security, and cooperation framework for the Democratic Republic of Congo, signed in February 2013 by 13 countries and 4 international and regional institutions, including the United Nations, the African Union, the International Conference on the Great Lakes region, and the South African Development Community. The PSCF was envisioned as a beacon of hope for the DRC and the region. We believed its full implementation would end the recurring cycle of conflict, address the root causes of instability, and foster trust among neighbors. Yet, more than a decade later, we find ourselves confronting the same issues that the framework was designed to resolve. The scorecard on implementation reveals significant gaps, with several key challenges and bottlenecks hindering progress. In Rwanda's view, the hopes of 2013 have yet to be fully realized a decade later. The ceasefire between warring parties and the Rwanda process, led by His Excellency João Lourenço, President of Angola, are good first steps that need to be backed by concrete action and strong commitment of the DRC government. Madam President, Council members, while the framework outlined a path towards peace and stability, the reality on the ground tells a different story. Key components of the framework remain either unimplemented or insufficiently addressed, including the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration of armed groups. Worse, some of the most critical root causes of the conflict, such as ethnic persecution and the presence of illegal foreign armed groups like the FDLR, continue to fuel instability in the region. The mushrooming of illegal armed groups that have found sanctuary in the eastern DRC is a critical challenge to peace in our region. The FDLR, a genocidal militia composed of perpetrators of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, is the longest-standing foreign armed group in eastern DRC. The FDLR and its splinter groups are at the center of the DRC conflict and were pivotal to the creation and existence of several other armed groups. Some Mai Mai armed groups were born to support it and have become its proxies, such as the Nyatura and its splinter groups, Pareko, and others. Over the last 3 decades, the FDR has been consistently committing ethnic cleansing, sexual violence, and large-scale human rights violations in Eastern DRC. Its neutralization and complete disengagement with the DRC armed forces, the FARDC, is key to finding a sustainable solution to the conflict in DRC. More threatening is the FDR's genocidal ideology, which has spilled over into the Congolese population and is shared with its proxies like Nyatura, Pareko, various Wazalendo groups, and allied Burundian troops in this conflict. I want to emphasize, Council members, that the debate about the number of FDR troops is misguiding. Even one radical element imbued with the genocide and terrorism ideology is a threat, let alone thousands operating with the support of the DRC and fighting alongside Burundian armed forces, Sami DRC, European mercenaries, and other armed groups, which FDR is embedded with those groups. As we seek to pull in the same direction for the successful implementation of the Rwanda process and the revitalization of the Nairobi process, there could be no tangible results if this evil force is not dismantled and systematically dismantled and sent out of DRC. Madam President, Council members, despite its designation as a terrorist organization, the FDR continues to thrive thanks to the continued support and financing by DRC. And according to UN reports, the FDR generates millions of dollars annually from illicit activities, including mineral exploitation, timber and charcoal trade, illegal tax collection, agriculture, and other businesses. This money is funneled to FRDC officers and local leaders, creating an economy of conflict that undermines peace efforts and perpetuates violence. This trend must be urgently addressed, and we call upon the Council to hold all actors accountable. Madam President, another fundamental issue hampering the full realization of the PSCF is the continued persecution of Congolese Tutsi communities. Hate speech, exclusion, discrimination, and violence against this community must be addressed as a central component of any sustainable solution. The PSC framework cannot achieve its intended goal if certain groups continue to be marginalized and killed for who they are. Addressing this is not only a human rights obligation, but a step towards fostering national unity and reconciliation in the DRC. In addition, Council members, the plight of Congolese refugees must be confronted as part of a holistic peace and security strategy. Sustainable peace will remain elusive unless we ensure that Congolese refugees and displaced populations can return to their homes safely and with dignity. This requires comprehensive measures that address the root causes of displacement and ensure that refugees are not left behind in the peace process. The Nairobi process and the Rwanda roadmap are steps in the right direction. But without a genuine commitment to inter-Congolese dialogue, the cycle of conflict will continue. Only through inclusive and transparent dialogue, one that brings all stakeholders to the table, including marginalized communities, can the DRC break free from its troubled past. We must foster a dialogue that addresses grievances, promotes justice, and builds trust among all Congolese citizens. It must be recalled that the Rwanda process alone cannot solve the DRC's problems without complementing it with the Nairobi process in an inclusive manner. This was loudly stated in this Council. Madam President, I want to take this opportunity to shed light on the minerals issue as it was raised in the SG report on MONUSCO, and also some Council members raised it this morning. The issue of mineral exploitation is a red herring dangled to distract from the real issues and root causes of the DRC conflict. I want to state here that it's rather puzzling that the Rubaya mine site under the M23 controlled territory currently is now given particular attention, especially given the fact that it was previously exploited by Pareco and its splinter groups, Codeco, FDLR, and Burundians, with minerals being smuggled across the Burundi border. At that time, there was no global outrage. Associating minerals with the M23 is a diversion from the root causes of the conflict and is demeaning to the political claims of Kinyarwanda-speaking Congolese of Eastern DRC. The only solution to address the illegal exploitation of minerals in Eastern DRC is to put in place the infrastructure, laws, and trade regulations, all of which cannot see light of the day without peace. Let us value and commit to the most crucial element of any societal and economic transformation, which is peace. And I mean peace in real capital letters. Madam President, Council members, before I conclude, I would like to highlight and emphasize 4 key facts that go to the heart of resolving the current conflict from the perspective of my country, Rwanda. First, DRC has to own up to this crisis. It must deal with its own internal contradictions and contestation with its own citizens. The M23, who are largely Kinyarwanda-speaking Congolese, are Congolese citizens. DRC cannot ignore or run away from that fact. The grievances they have that force them to fight for their rights are with their government. That's the government of the DRC. I want to emphasize here that the current M23 didn't come to DRC from Rwanda. They came from Uganda. The facts are that the M23 group that went to Rwanda after their defeat in 2013 were disarmed and cantoned in eastern Rwanda, close to Rwanda-Tanzania border. That is hundreds of kilometers away from the border between DRC and Rwanda. And that was deliberately done to ensure that they're very far from the Congolese border so that there's no risk of them destabilizing their country. Their arms were officially handed over to the DRC government. That's also a fact that is on record. How then does this become a Rwanda problem? DRC must stop externalizing this problem to Rwanda and must take full ownership and leadership in resolving its own internal crisis. Second, the esteemed Council, as the custodian of global and regional peace and security, must be seriously concerned and indeed alarmed by the amassing of foreign fighters in Eastern DRC. Since the conflict re-emerged, DRC has run from country to country, mobilizing fighters and military support to fight its own citizens, the M23. Today, Eastern DRC has a cocktail of European and other mercenaries, and I mean mercenaries, paid mercenaries. You have their Burundian troops. You have their Sami-DRC troops drawn from South Africa, Tanzania, and Malawi. One should wonder whether this helps to find a lasting solution or aggravates an already dire conflict and jeopardizes any efforts to find a lasting solution. As this council already stated, there's no military solution to this conflict. Solution lies in a political solution. Therefore, for DRC as a state actor to resort to the hiring of foreign mercenaries, amass foreign troops, and undertake state-orchestrated proliferation of arms to unruly militia dubbed Wazalendo, who have committed human rights violations, including rape and sexual violence, and the FDL genocide, all with the aim of fighting its own Kinyarwanda-speaking community, whose only demands from their DRC government is protection of their inherent citizen rights, their human rights, and the right to live in peace and decently on their ancestral land. That's a matter that this council must call out and condemn. Third, DRC must disengage with FDLR, a genocide terrorist armed group that poses an existential threat to Rwanda. FDLR and its splinter groups are currently embedded with Congolese army, RDC, and are armed and supported by DRC government. It must resolve this and completely disengage with FDLR and remove the threat to a neighbor in order to guarantee lasting peace and good neighborliness. This is at the core of the Rwanda process. Fourth, Rwanda is fully committed to improving relations with DRC, and we mean this genuinely, honestly, and seriously. We recognize that good relations between our two countries are in the best interest of our peoples and the region. The Great Lakes region has great potential. Our people are interconnected geographically, culturally, in terms of our infrastructure, so there is a lot to gain when there is peace among us. However, these relations will only succeed if we all own the regional processes, that's the Nairobi and Rwanda. Rwanda has consistently demonstrated its willingness to engage constructively, and we believe that with total commitment to the Rwanda and Nairobi processes, we can pave the way for a more peaceful and cooperative future. In simpler terms, Rwanda believes that there is no military solution, as I said, to what is a political problem. In conclusion, Madam President, Council members, Rwanda remains completely committed to the peace, security, and cooperation framework for the DRC. With the right actions and renewed commitment from all parties, we believe this framework can still deliver on its promise of peace and stability. Rwanda stands ready to support the Special Envoy in all the efforts to bring about lasting peace in the region. The Great Lakes region has immense potential, as I said, and I continue to emphasize that, and with peace, we can unlock that potential and transform our region into one of the fastest growing regions in Africa. I thank you for your kind attention.
Je remercie le Rwanda. Je passe la parole au représentant de l'Angola.
Madame la Présidente du Conseil de sécurité, merci pour la parole. Distinguished member of the Security Council, all protocol observed, Excellencies. Allow us to begin by congratulating Switzerland on its presidency of the Security Council in this month of October. We wish you success in this role. We are convinced that your country's long-standing commitment to the world peace will make an important contribution to further strengthening the role of the Security Council in advancing its global peace and security agenda. We acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency Mrs. Teresa Kayukwamba Wagner, Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Francophonie of the Democratic Republic of Congo. We also acknowledge with satisfaction the presence of His Excellency Ernest Rumwacho, the permanent representative of Rwanda, in this meeting. We would like to thank Mr. Wang Chia, Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the Great Lake region, for introducing the SCG's reports and for his tireless efforts in the implementation of the commitment under the Peace, Security, and Cooperation Framework for the Democratic Republic of Congo and the region. We also commend his efforts to meet regional leaders to promote dialogue and supporting regional peace initiatives. In addition, a word of appreciation to Mrs. Sarah Tambwe, Executive Director of Change Your World, for the compelling remarks she has made. Madam President, the report before us today examines the major political, peace, and security development in the Great Lake region and indicates that during the period under review, the overall security situation in parts of the Great Lake region has further deteriorated. However, it also recognizes regional peace initiatives undertaken by leaders in the region through high-level political engagements in a view to restore trust, promote peace and stability in the region, including through the Rwanda and Nairobi processes. Madam President, the Peace, Security, and Cooperation Framework for the Democratic Republic of Congo and the region, with 13 signatory countries and 4 international organizations acting as guarantor of the framework, remains the most comprehensive tool at our disposal to address the broader security situation and for the attainment of long-term peace and stability in the Great Lakes region. In this regard, we note with appreciation that the government of the DRC continues to implement its national commitments and member states continue to strengthen bilateral and regional cooperation. Additionally, the guarantor institutions continue their engagement under the Peace and Security Cooperation Framework. We welcome all efforts toward the revitalization of the Peace, Security, and Cooperation Framework, including the elaboration of the draft action plan for consideration by the head of states during the 12th high-level summit of the Regional Oversight Mechanism. Madam President, the Republic of Angola attached particular importance to the implementation of the results of the quadripartite summit comprised by East African Community, the Economic Community of Central African States, the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, and Southern African Development Community, aimed at coordinating and harmonizing action and initiative for peace in the region. Further steps were taken at different levels. We consider equally important the monitoring the progress made in the implementation of the agreed commitments. Further, we would like to draw your attention to reiterate our serious concern about the situation in Sudan, where a violent war is raging with humanitarian consequences of dramatic proportion in the face of certain apathy of the international community, which must seek to converge its efforts and act in accordance with the African Union to promote and achieve lasting peace in that country. Madam President, the Republic of Angola reiterates its concern about the persistent instability in the Great Lakes region, particularly the continuing deterioration of the security and humanitarian situation in the Eastern DRC. The increasing of military action by M23 and other armed groups, including occupation of new areas, constitutes a serious and flagrant violation of the Rwanda and Nairobi processes, thus undermining diplomatic efforts and initiatives for peace and stability in the DRC and the region. Nevertheless, we remain committed to actively contributing to reach a political and diplomatic solution aimed at achieving sustainable peace in the DRC and the region, as evidenced in the President Lourenço's address at the General Assembly at its 79th session. In fact, in his capacity as chairperson of the African Union for Peace and Reconciliation in Africa and president of the International Conference on the Great Lakes region, His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, has spared no efforts to undertake a series of diplomatic initiatives centered at promoting peace and stability, reducing political tension in the region, and reestablishing an atmosphere of trust between DRC and Rwanda through the Rwanda process. We are highly encouraged by the commitment and confidence shown by His Excellency Felix Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, in the Rwanda process as a mechanism for a political solution to the instability in the east of the DRC. Madam President, the political and high-level engagements undertaken within the scope of the Rwanda process were outlined before this Security Council last week by His Excellency Francisco José da Cruz, the permanent representative of Angola to the United Nations. As mentioned, the next ministerial meeting between our two brother countries is scheduled to take place in Rwanda within the next couple of days, with the aim of reaching and an understanding leading to a summit of heads of state that could seal definitive peace and the normalization of diplomatic relations between the two brother countries. Angola considers important that we continue to focus our diplomatic efforts and action to consolidate the progress made in the process thus far. Thus, we would like to express our gratitude for the support of the countries of the region, regional and international organizations, in particular, the confidence demonstrated by the members of this Council to the Rwanda and Nairobi processes. We also take this opportunity to welcome all relevant initiatives made under the Nairobi process, including continued outreach efforts made during the period under review by His Excellency Salva Kiir, President of South Sudan, in his capacity as Eastern Africa Community Chairperson, and by the facilitator of the EAC-led Nairobi process and former President of Kenya, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta. We also express our appreciation by efforts made by all leaders in the region at various levels to diffuse tension and consolidate peace in the region. To conclude, Madam President, the Republic of Angola will continue to prioritize dialogue as one of the main political diplomatic instruments for reaching a political and sustainable solution to the complex problem in the Great Lakes region. As His Excellency President João Lourenço stated in his address to the General Assembly on the 24th September, and I quote, "We have learned our own conflict that there is no peace without dialogue and no peace without the concession of both sides. This is a path that cannot be neglected in the context of all efforts to resolve the serious security crisis facing the world today." End of quote. I thank you, Madam President.
Je remercie le représentant de l'Angola et Son Excellence Madame Thérèse Kaikwamba Wagner, ministre des Affaires étrangères, a demandé la parole pour faire une autre déclaration. Je la lui donne pour une courte intervention. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. En effet, je vais me concentrer sur 2 points, sans m'attarder sur le plaidoyer vibrant du Rwanda en faveur du M23. Premièrement, sur les accusations de menaces contre les minorités ethniques, rappelons que notre pays, riche de sa diversité, a toujours su protéger et garantir la cohabitation pacifique et la sécurité de tous ces groupes. Le principe de souveraineté impose que chaque État contrôle pleinement ses affaires internes et nous exigeons son respect total. Ce qui est malheureux, c'est que le Rwanda se sert du faux prétexte d'un prétendu altruisme envers certaines minorités pour justifier ces violations de notre souveraineté. Des décennies d'ingérence rwandaise montrent que ce discours sert une politique prédatrice motivée par des intérêts économiques dans l'Est de la RDC. Ce discours reflète un mépris profond des principes de la Charte des Nations Unies et de la dignité humaine, des vies congolaises qui méritent la même protection que toutes les autres. Deuxièmement, concernant les FDLR, je souhaite rappeler qu'au fil des ans, la RDC n'a cessé de prouver son engagement pour leur neutralisation, y compris par des opérations conjointes avec la MONUSCO et même avec le Rwanda. Notre engagement est indéfectible sur cette question, sachant que les FDLR causent un préjudice considérable à nos propres citoyens. Madame la Présidente, estimés membres du Conseil, permettez-moi de conclure en rappelant qu'aujourd'hui, la République démocratique du Congo a expliqué à ce Conseil pourquoi nous insistons sur l'inclusion de dispositions pour la redevabilité et la justice dans tout futur accord de paix avec le Rwanda. Par contre, ce que le Rwanda n'a pas su nous expliquer aujourd'hui, c'est son mépris pour l'intégrité territoriale du Congo, sa crainte d'un accord de paix avec une clause de redevabilité qui sanctionnerait des violations du dit accord, et enfin sa peur à l'idée d'un mécanisme de justice pour traiter les violations du droit international depuis la résurgence du M23. Cette crise nous a révélé une vérité amère. Un seul pays animé par de mauvaises intentions suffit à déclencher une guerre. Mais il faut la volonté sincère d'au moins 2 nations pour parvenir à la paix. Ce Conseil doit tenir tous les acteurs responsables de leurs actions afin de garantir le succès du processus de paix, en plaçant la Charte des Nations Unies et la dignité humaine au cœur de nos efforts. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie la représentante de la RDC. Le représentant du Rwanda a demandé la parole pour faire une autre déclaration. Je la lui donne pour une courte intervention.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I usually don't take a rebuttal, but I wanted to respond on this. One, really to be clear that DRC must stop blaming its problem on others. DRC has had political and security challenges for decades. Many of these even precede the independence of Rwanda. So it cannot be Rwanda that is responsible for DRC problems, and time has come for it to take full ownership and systematically, honestly, and genuinely address its own internal problems. Partners can help, but partners cannot take ownership of those problems. Rwanda is not responsible for the existence of Codeco in DRC, ADF, Zaire, Nyatura and its many splinter groups. We are not responsible for the existence of M23, and as documented by DRC's PDDRC demobilization report, which was produced in December last year, which documented 250 local armed groups in DRC and 14 foreign armed groups. Rwanda is not responsible for all of that. So you must take responsibility. On the issue of territorial integrity, we agree the territorial integrity of DRC matters, but the territorial integrity of Rwanda also matters. We have never had an attack from any of our neighbors. Most of the attacks in Rwanda for the last 30 years have come from DRC, and FDR is responsible for this. Why is DRC continuing to preserve, support, and maintain FDLR? Simple. Disengage, dismantle FDLR, which is embedded with your army, and peace will return to the region. So this is very, very important. I really wanted to call upon this council to be very clear on this matter, that DRC has to be responsible for the protection of its own citizens. The Kinyarwanda-speaking Congolese are Congolese. They deserve equal protection like any other citizen. This cannot be a Rwanda problem. Thank you very much.